Hi everybody, I'm Gwendolyn Sterk and I'm here today from Sterk Family Law with Seth Matus. Tell us about yourself, Seth.
Hi there, my name is Seth Matus. I'm a labor and employment attorney.
And we're here today with Seth to talk about employment law for small businesses. Look, if any of you know us, you know that we have tons of resources and we work with a lot of small businesses to be able to accommodate the needs of our clientele. And what we're experiencing, Seth, is a lot of the small businesses having questions about employment matters that come up. So I really wanted to address this and have our individual clients be able to understand what employers should do in a proper sense.
Absolutely.
And also the employers have an understanding of what they really need to look at. So a new business comes in, they're small, they might have 10 employees total. Where should they start?
There's a lot of different areas where you need to think about in terms of employment law as a new business. First of all, we need to be thinking about who are your employees? Are you properly classifying them?
Okay.
And by that, what I mean, first of all, sometimes there's this idea of a 1099 employee versus an actual employee.
That independent contractor, right?
Independent contractor versus employee. That's become one of the huge areas of employment law. And if you have someone who is with you for a long, long time and you're calling him a 1099 employee, that's an area where you can get into a lot of trouble. Because what can happen is that the Internal Revenue Service can come in and say, hey, you should have been paying all your FICA taxes. You should have been doing all those sorts of things.
And then having employee benefits, right?
Exactly, employee benefits. Or maybe what happens is that this person becomes disgruntled and he says, I should have been treated as an employee. Maybe you weren't paying this person overtime. You should have been receiving overtime. And all of a sudden, you have this huge lawsuit brought by this person who you thought was an independent contractor, but is truly an employee.
Okay, so if that's one area,
yes,
and people need to address that with all their employees, what else should employers be doing almost as a preemptive strike?
Absolutely. Well, there's a number of employment policies which I recommend any employer, no matter what the size. And nobody likes to think about any of these types of events happening, but there are certainly areas where employers need to protect themselves. I think first and foremost, employers need to have a sexual harassment policy.
Sure.
And maybe they don't think that it's ever going to happen in their office, but it's something which just provides so much benefit to an employer, and if you don't have it, you can get into a lot of trouble. But basically what the law provides is so long as there is a reasonable process, and it's written down, and it's known by the employees, well, unless it's what they call quid pro quo harassment, which is basically the type of situation where an employer, a boss says, well, you have to sleep with me or you're going to get fired. Well,
or
if
not
it's
get a promotion.
or not get a promotion or anything.
Right.
If it is instead what they call hostile work environment, what ends up happening is that, if there is that policy, and it's a reasonable policy, and the
it's followed through,
it's followed through.
Right.
Well, you can actually beat any type of claim of hostile work environment harassment. It's huge for employers.
Now, but just that sexual harassment policy, that's
Yes.
one policy. But wouldn't it be good for employees and employers to have an employee manual so that they understand what the overall
when you
policy
think about
is?
all the different things that you want your employees to know, that is absolutely why you need to have an employment manual.
Right. Think about security with information today, disposing, use of the internet, use of the email, right?
Tardiness.
Sure.
Absenteeism.
Okay.
Whether we're talking about, say, like, I'm just trying to think of examples. What are the sorts of things which are going to get an employee in trouble?
Okay.
You can list all those sorts of things down and make sure that everybody understands what are the ground rules. That's what you need a policy for. You might be talking about things like vacation time.
Sure.
If you want to offer it, you need to have it written down so it's fair and understood and objective.
And equally applied, really, across the board. Okay, so we talked about wage and versus the 1099 independent contractor. We're talking about an employee manual. What else in a general stroke would you suggest to small businesses to consider?
Well, I think that small businesses also need to be thinking about things like, getting back to vacation, leave issues. Like what ends up happening when you have employees who become pregnant? What happens when you have employees who end up with some sort of illness? They need to have time off. I mean, it will depend on the size.
Right,
but
and
I
then
think
domestic violence.
Domestic
right?
violence is another great example.
Yeah, and all
So-
these things. And I also think that it's important that one of the things is that no employer in a small business situation who doesn't do employment law, so to speak, or have an in-house person, they really have to have somebody available to them to pick up the phone and say, hey, you know what, my employee just said I had to accommodate them for a situation with a disability. How do you handle it? How do you approach it? So what kind of options are available for small businesses to work with someone like you in an employment law situation?
It really does depend on the situation. If we're
Okay.
talking about policies, a lot of times what I do is I offer employers flat rates for certain types of policies. Let's say you want to have a handbook. Let's say you just want to have a sexual harassment policy. We will talk, rather than saying I'm charging you by the hour, I'll give you a flat rate to do that job, and it will save you money. You'll know exactly from
Right.
day one what it's going to cost you.
And then once they become a client of yours, if there's an employment matter that comes up, I would think they could just pick up the phone, ask you the question, and you can give them guidance on the spot.
Absolutely. That's real easy.
Right, and I think that that's important because I think that there's a lot of liability out there for individuals and for employers. The risks are growing in today's society. When you think about the need for insurance,
Yes.
in certain fields, malpractice insurance. I know we're looking at cyber insurance. You look at your general insurance. You got employee practices insurance. Sometimes having that insurance, but also having insurance through having somebody right on the phone available to do that, because these businesses aren't able to have an in-house human resource
Absolutely
person.
not.
Right.
It's real hard. I think a lot of times you need to be thinking about, well, what are your possible risks towards your own employees? Like, are you violating any type of employment
Sure.
law? But are these employees doing anything which might expose you to liability?
Right, and knowing
All those
how to
sorts
deal
of
with it.
things
Yeah.
become a huge issue.
So I think that that's what the call is today. Is that the call is that if you're an individual listening today and you're working for a company and you think that they're interfering with your rights or your obligations to you, they can pick up the phone and have one service from you being that an advocate of an employee.
Absolutely.
But also then the flip side of your practice is really accommodating those small businesses to be able to say, hey, call, get an employee handbook, and this is what we can do.
And I've done that for 18 years in
Right.
all sorts of employers, whether we're talking about small industrial organizations up to tech companies.
And it's interesting to me because this is really different than corporate law. This
Yes.
isn't their corporate record keeping. This is really dealing with the employee issues and making sure that you're lowering that risk by getting that information that you need.
And as you said, Gwen, I mean, it's not just something which is it's changing. You need to watch federal law. You need to watch state law. Maybe you operate across state lines. You're in Indiana too.
Sure.
Well, then you have a whole separate set of laws.
Right.
Then you have local laws.
And then we were talking earlier about some local
Yeah.
laws and rights that are out there. And I think it's important that, even in the field of law, I practice in family law and we now do estate planning. But I don't know your area of law. And, they think of that general practitioner. Even us lawyers aren't general practitioners.
No.
There's no way that we would be able to do it. That's why we bring you on. That's why Seth is here, so that we can have these conversations. So to our resources that we provide to our clients, to the small businesses that we collaborate with, and to the individuals that are out there listening to this information. The call today is to know that there are employment lawyers out there, to know that Seth would be available to you to be able to answer these types of questions, and you would consult with them as well. Is that
Absolutely.
correct? So why don't you give your
100%.
phone number and your website?
Very good. Yes, you can reach me. My website is www.Matus Law Office, and that's MATUS lawoffice.com. My phone number is area code 630-470-6875.
Well, thanks very much for being with us. I think
Thanks,
that
Gwen.
this is critical information. So you know what? We all have questions, and knowledge is power. So we appreciate your time in listening today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.